This is the Executive Profile, exclusively on CBT News. Today's episode has been sponsored by the Presidio Group.
On this edition of the Executive Profile, we visited Ben Keating at the headquarters of Keating Auto Group in Victoria, Texas. Ben Keating is a rare breed, a visionary automotive entrepreneur and a world-class race car driver whose dual passions have propelled him to the pinnacle of both industries. As the founder and principal of Keating Auto Group, he oversees one of Texas's largest privately held dealership networks, encompassing over 30 franchises across the state. Yet it's his second act behind the wheel that captivated motorsports fans worldwide. Ben and I discussed some of the important issues facing dealers today, including tariffs, EVs, and economic headwinds. We also discussed some of the many personal and professional challenges Ben faced in building his automotive empire. I know you'll enjoy this special edition of the Executive Profile featuring Ben Keating. Ben Keating, president and owner of Keating Automotive Group here in Victoria, Texas. Thank you so much for allowing us to come in and spend some time with you here at CBT News.
Thank you, Jim. I'm excited that you came all the way to Victoria, Texas.
It's a beautiful spot. And again, we appreciate you allowing us to come in here and have you featured on the Executive Profile. So let's start in the beginning and tell me a little bit about, your family, your background. You're a third generation auto dealer. And was the family from Victoria?
No. When I grew up, my grandparents were in Baytown, Texas, on the east side of Houston.
Okay.
My grandfather was an engineer for Exxon, or Humble Oil back in the day, I would say. Eventually, he and his brother became a car dealer. They decided it'd be fun to buy a dealership. And then eventually, so my grandfather became a Ford dealer. His brother became a Chevy dealer. And then
battling it out in the same area. Huh?
That's right.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right. But as it happened, my grandfather had 5 children.
Yeah,
4 of them became Ford dealers.
That is incredible. Wow.
And
what circa is this? What time period are we talking about?
I'm going to say that I think they started selling out of their dealerships in the late 80s.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that they were a dealer. I know that, my grandfather was a dealer in the early 60s.
Okay.
So something around that time frame.
Sure.
Yeah, I've got all these photos of my grandfather with a brand new 65 Mustang sitting on the showroom floor.
Wow. What that would bring today, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But so I grew up around the business. So my father was the Ford dealer in Tomball.
Okay.
I moved there when I was 2 weeks old. And so, I say I wasn't born in Texas, but I moved here as quickly as I could. But I grew up in and around the car business at Tomball Ford. And every time we went to, Thanksgiving or Christmas or any family holiday, the conversation around the table was, it was like a little 20 group.
I would imagine.
Everybody was a Ford dealer.
That's right.
And always talking about the various aspects of the business.
I bet.
As a kid, I didn't really think I was, learning anything.
Yeah.
Now I look back on it and know that, I was learning through osmosis.
That's right. At the very highest level, by the way.
Right.
You got all these dealer principals sitting around the table, right? And it's how many do you have out this month? What's your average gross profit? What's your back end look like? Oh, probably back then there wasn't a back end, right? It was
so it's really interesting. So in 1971, my father was working for Owens Corning Fiberglass in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And he got a call from his father, my grandfather, that said, why don't you come to Baytown, move back to Texas, and start this new thing in our industry called finance and insurance.
Oh my gosh, imagine that. F&I.
And so in 1971, my grandfather was asking my dad to come down to start this new thing.
Isn't that amazing?
And halfway down they stopped at a payphone to give an update on their travels. And halfway down, when they called my grandfather to say, hey, this is where we are, he said, hey, what do you think about being a dealer instead? And so he had gotten a line on the Ford dealership in Tomball. And so,
that completes the circle of all the boys.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
Wow.
kind of how it went down.
Yeah. Funny, because if in the event he had daughters, it might have been different, because certainly.
So he did.
Okay.
When I say that he had 5 children and 4 of them became dealers,
Right.
2 of those were daughters.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. Wow. So, early on.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't see a lot of female dealers that early, of course, we need more female dealers today in the business, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something. So, so let's pick it up from there. So you go to work for and with your dad in the store?
No, so my experience in working in the dealership was made up of parking cars in a straight line, washing cars, and picking up trash.
Okay.
That's all I knew about the business. Sure. And I hated the business.
Felt like you were doing
all my memories were, making minimum wage, doing minimum wage type jobs.
Sure.
And I hated it.
Right.
So, I ended up going to Texas A&M and getting an engineering degree. And I wanted nothing to do with the business.
Okay.
Did
you think because of the experience you had picking up trash and cleaning cars, you were like, if this is the car business?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
No, it's like, that's all I knew about the business.
Yeah.
So I wanted nothing to do with it.
Sure.
And I ended up, in the middle of my engineering degree, I was expected to do an internship.
Okay.
And I struggled to, find the right internship for me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the vendors with Tomball Ford, for Tomball Ford, I think got wind that I was looking for something, and invited me to do an internship with his company.
Okay.
And so I did an internship with what I now would say is an insurance company.
Okay.
But their foot in the door was doing training.
Okay.
And so I went to a different dealership every week, all summer long.
Wow.
Doing training for car dealers. And some of it was sales manager training. Some of it was salesperson training. Some of it was F&I.
This is great training for you to be.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so, knowing that I had this history of growing up around these car dealer type conversations,
yes,
I had some sort of an idea in my head of what a well-run store would look like.
Sure.
And
you had exposure to so many.
And so I also recognized it as being an ultra competitive environment.
Right.
And so what I came out of this internship with were several things. Number one, these guys, I got access to see what kind of money these guys were making.
Yeah.
As a poor college kid, it was
pretty impressive.
It was an enormous sum of money.
Sure.
And so I thought, number one, these guys are making a ton of money. Number two,
right.
Generally speaking, these guys, in my know-it-all college kid and naive self,
right,
I thought these guys are doing a terrible job of running their business.
You knew more.
That's right.
Right.
I won't say I knew more,
yeah,
but I thought that they were just not doing a very good job of running their business.
Sure.
And
would you have conversations with your dad about this? No,
not yet.
Okay.
But so. Because I recognized it as being an ultra competitive environment, I thought, man, if these guys are my competition, then this is the business I have to get into because I can run circles around these guys.
Sure.
And even running it as poorly as they're running it, they're still making this much money.
Right. Right.
that is literally where I decided that I was going to get in the car business.
And that's
So, my wife and I met in engineering at A&M.
okay.
We got married 1 week after we graduated. I told her to get a job anywhere USA because I can get a job in the car business.
Right.
So she went to work at Dell, building, laptops.
Yeah. Wow.
Back in 1995.
Okay.
And I got a job selling Fords at Covert Ford in Austin.
Wow.
So my start was selling cars in Austin.
Yeah.
And
Did you find it to be as easy as you thought it was going to be when you were versus the training?
So I grew up at Tomball Ford,
Okay.
where the guys that I knew to be successful were selling somewhere between 12 to 15 cars a month.
Okay.
And I knew that most of the guys at the dealership, the high performers, were selling 12 to 15. At Covert Ford, when I started in 95, this dealership was selling anywhere from 600 to 800 vehicles a month. It was a very big store.
That is a high volume store. Yeah.
And they had roughly 45 salespeople.
Okay.
Very, smartly, I would say now, but they only kept track of the top 10 on the board.
Really?
And so when you walked into the sales manager's office, you only saw the top 25% of their salespeople.
Sure.
And I'm looking up there in my interview, and I'm like, it's 25 and 22, and 20, and but everybody was selling 20 cars a month.
Wow.
And so
From your perspective.
From my perspective.
Right.
I knew what the top performers that I grew up with were doing.
Sure.
And I thought I was scared to death.
Right.
And to me, this was I was making my bet on my life and my career.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife at the time, I don't know if I'm going to be successful in this or not, but I'm going to work from the time we open to the time we close 6 days a week for this first month.
Yeah.
And I'm making a commitment to myself that I'm never going to walk away from the opportunity to talk to a customer.
Isn't that great?
And the end result is that, I sold 26 cars my first month.
Wow. That's
I was salesman of the month.
Wow.
My first month.
Very good.
And
you were hooked.
In 1995, I made $11,400 as a salesperson that's selling cars.
That's phenomenal.
Which, the highest paid job that I graduated with at the time was $40,000 a year.
Oh my gosh.
When I had just made $11,000 my first month selling cars, I'm like,
gosh, yeah, you're in.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Completely hooked.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny because people that are getting into the business today, they don't necessarily, as we know, they don't have that attitude of I'm going to work key to key and I'm going to work 6 days a week and I'm going to give it my all. And I'm going to, the first question today is, well, what's my time off? And what's the balance, the work-life balance all about? And, and we'll talk about that, but they don't, the people coming into stores now to work, they just aren't the same as when you and I cut our teeth in the business, right?
We do a lot of recruiting out of Texas A&M.
Okay.
We have a really big kind of a system set up to where we do a lot of recruiting.
That's great. Wow.
And that's one of the things that we have learned through the years of needing to deal with, needing to set up the right expectations.
That's right.
For what this business is and what it isn't.
That's right.
Because you got to make sure they've got the proper expectations if they're going to be successful long term.
So here you are kind of knocking the cover off the ball in another dealership. When do you join forces with the family business?
So it's really funny as I look back on it. So I was very successful selling cars.
Yeah. I can't believe your dad wasn't on the phone every week going.
So for 6 months, I sold cars for 6 months, and I thought I was doing really well. I was really eager to move up. Mm-hmm. And Covert Ford, the dealership I worked for, was promoting a salesperson off of the floor to go into finance.
Okay.
Be a finance manager.
Yeah.
And they did not interview me. And so I was taken aback by that at the time.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm doing a great job
Yeah.
here. I'm jumping through all the hoops. I'm doing everything I need to do. I'm not saying that I should be the one that is promoted, but I want to feel like I was at least considered.
Sure.
I want to be interviewed.
Sure.
And I came to the realization that I wasn't going to move up as fast
Okay.
at this store as I wanted to.
Sure.
And I was very close with my dad at this time.
Okay.
And I knew him well enough to know that the only reason he hadn't fired his used car manager was because he didn't have a replacement. And so I asked my father for the used car manager position.
Wow.
At Tomball Ford.
Wow. That's different than a salesperson, as you know, in the business, right?
And my mom was wise enough to say, this is a terrible idea. Do not do it. And
to you or to him or to both?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
And we did it anyway.
Okay. Okay.
And that's how I got started.
Isn't that something? Wow. Never look back.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you stayed at that dealership, and then talk to me about that, because I know that.
So I became used car manager in '96, and I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of problem solving.
Yeah.
Everything about a used car inventory out there is, everybody's judgment calls are on display.
Of course they are. No question.
Especially back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before
you didn't have the technology.
Before you had all the technology that's available today.
Right.
It was, what do I keep and what do I wholesale? Yeah. What do I recondition and what do I not recondition?
What did I step on and pay way too much for?
Where do I price it at?
Yeah.
And so, everybody's decisions are out on display.
This is true.
And I loved that analytical type of problem solving in that environment.
Now, that can also be one of those areas, if you took over used cars or you're working for your dad, where he's like, hey, your wholesale loss is too much, and that car's 120 days. Were there arguments that ensued because of that?
We were very close at the time, and I was very successful quickly.
Well, there you go. Why?
And so it was more of, he put me on a pedestal going, man, look how good he is.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Proud of you. Yeah.
And so, it's kind of interesting how things went along.
Sure.
I ended up, so we were a Ford store. He gave me the opportunity to buy in as a partner in the store at 5% per year for 5 years.
Nice.
So all the money I could save was going into buying this 5% per year. It was a very discounted rate.
Yeah.
And the idea was, I'll sell you this 25% for 5% for 5 years at a discounted rate.
Right.
Then the next 25% will be at a much higher rate. And then the last 50% is going to be outrageously high.
Still a very good deal.
But you're going to have the income to pay for it.
Right.
Couldn't beat the terms.
Of course.
And so, but still at that point, everything I could save was going into buying this 5% per year.
Right.
And so I was an owner in the store, but I was still the used car manager.
Yeah.
And I ended up hiring my Ford rep to be the general sales manager.
No kidding.
So the used car manager is hiring the Ford rep to be the GSM.
Right. Who's also an owner.
It's so
a little convoluted, but
eventually that GSM got an opportunity to be a general manager for AutoNation. So he left.
Okay.
I took that position. So I became the GSM there.
Okay.
And took on those roles. And then everything was going fairly well.
Yeah.
But as I got more involved in the leadership of the entire dealership, and I would say more of my decisions are on display for everybody to critique.
Sure.
then we started to have a little conflict.
Okay. So now it's just the one store that your dad has at that point in time, and he's slowly selling it to you. Was his goal there to retire at some point in time, or to acquire more stores? What was he thinking there?
I guess I'll say I think that was the original intent.
Yeah.
I'll also say we'll never know.
Yeah.
My dad, his passion or his fun, was we like to always say he loved to play in the dirt.
Okay.
He had a lot of farmland. He had a lot of tractors and bulldozers and backhoes, and he owned several pecan orchards.
Sure. Wow.
And so
that was his passion.
He loved to play with heavy machinery in the dirt. And so from the time of, I'm going to say, from 96 through not 96. I'm going to say from 98 through 2001.
Okay.
Yes, 2000. We were moving to a new dealership location.
Okay.
So we bought property.
Okay.
And he was basically the general contractor, but he did all the dirt work himself.
No kidding.
Raised 17 acres, 4 feet.
Oh my God.
It was a swamp kind of area. And, he was gone playing in the dirt for 3 years.
Okay. And in that amount of time, did you step up to become the general manager?
No, I was the GSM.
GSM, okay.
The general manager had been there for 40 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He wasn't going anywhere.
Right. Okay.
So at this time, I was 20% owner.
Okay.
But I was the GSM.
Okay. Okay.
I was making a lot of those decisions.
Sure. You're running the front end of the business.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so after we moved into the new building, after the construction process was completed, and we're in there and we're rolling, I'll say a couple of things. My dad had been absent from the involvement for 2 or 3 years, which gave me a lot of autonomy to make things my own.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then the other thing was that after that was over, he's back involved and he's looking for something to do.
Okay. Sure.
And that's where the conflict really kind of started.
Yeah, sure.
Because he would say, that's not how I want to do it.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's how we've done it for the last 2 years.
Right.
And so,
sure, there's a lot of people watching that can relate to that story.
That's right.
For sure.
There were too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And the kitchen was too small.
That's right.
That's right. And we only had one dealership. To work under, and I think part of it is that it was my unwillingness. To I can't think of the right word, but
just acquiesce to his
exactly to his leadership.
Sure. Understand.
I was very passionate about how I thought it should be done.
And as we're in our younger years,
when he came in and said, "Hey, that's not how I want to do it,"
sure.
Well, I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And so when 9/11 happened, it was a big deal. My dad was ultra conservative. I would call him a doomsday prepper kind of a guy.
Okay.
And always, we used to always call him Chicken Little. The bird, the sky's falling.
Yeah.
The sky is falling.
Sure.
And so when 9/11 happened, he was like, "This is it. We're going to have World War III.
Oh, wow.
This is the big event that I've been telling you that's going to be coming for the last 20 years. Wow. This is it.
Wow.
It's time to circle the wagons. Hunker down, batten down the hatches. This is the big one. And he was ultra conservative. Those dealers who were around back then can remember that this was the first time in the history of the world that we had 0%.
I remember.
Month.
Yes.
And so it was a big deal.
Sure.
Everyone
did very well.
Really good rate was back then was about similar to what it is today, actually, which is kind of funny.
I know. That's right.
Yeah. So,
and it was if you remember, I think it was the GM and all of the manufacturers got together, and the theme was "Keep America Rolling."
That's right.
So everybody did their part by going out and buying a car.
And so, a good rate on a used car was 7 or 8%.
Yeah.
And you're getting 0% on a new one.
Yep.
We were selling new cars faster than we'd ever sold them before.
Of course.
Nobody wanted a used car.
Right.
So, I'm looking at it going, go, sell. And we're knocking the cover off the ball. This is awesome. Go. Full throttle ahead.
Right.
My dad is saying, we have a huge oversupply of used cars.
Because you're taking all these trades now.
Yeah. You're making $2,000 on every new car you sell when I'm losing $5,000 on every trade you take in. And so we had this huge clash.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, I got fired.
Okay.
Wow. And
from your own store.
Sure. And it was an ugly split.
Yeah. Okay. That's unfortunate.
At the time, it was, I don't care what you do with your stock, I'm not going to buy it.
Okay.
And so I don't have anybody to sell it to.
Yeah, of course.
And then, of course, I at the time I owned 20% of the store.
Right.
And I have to pay tax on that income.
Wow.
But there were he didn't make any distributions.
So you're coming out of your pocket to do the tax.
To have the income to pay that tax.
Sure.
I didn't have any money in the bank.
And of course, your relationship on a personal side suffered, I'm sure, right?
It was, we all got attorneys.
Yeah.
And it was an unfortunate deal.
I can't tell you how many times I've sat across from dealers that have told similar stories.
Yeah. And so I was unemployed for 5 months.
Yeah.
Really looking hard for an opportunity to buy because I wanted my own store.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
All my money was tied up in that dealership.
Yeah.
I owned 33% of the real estate.
Okay.
I owned 20% of the dealership and 6 to 10% of reinsurance,
Sure.
Insurance side of stuff.
Sure.
I felt like, at the time, I felt like a reasonable number on everything was $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't going to give me anything for it.
Yeah.
And so
you have a whole bunch of nothing at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I remember having $1,000 in the bank and having a mortgage of $1,200.
Oh boy.
Payment.
Yeah. But on paper, you're a multimillionaire.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say multi.
But I'm saying, if you've got, so like you said, $10 million and all of these assets, but you can't touch it.
Value is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Right.
So I ended up, I went to the auction and bought cars on a friend's dealer license and wholesaled them to another dealer.
I got you.
Just to be able to make my mortgage payment.
Sure.
But I got the GSM I worked for at Tomball Ford when I was a 12-year-old punk kid.
Wow.
Washing cars and parking cars at Tomball Ford.
Yeah.
My GSM was the Dodge Chrysler Jeep dealer in Port Lavaca, Texas. And he called me. He knew I was looking for an opportunity.
Sure.
He called me and said, "Hey, the Ford dealer just went broke in Port Lavaca. You need to get down here and check this deal out."
Yeah.
So I went down there and
wow.
Again, make a long story really short, kind of put it all in a nutshell. I negotiated a deal to purchase the dealership.
Good for
in
you.
Port Lavaca.
No cash in the bank. And
yeah.
Wow.
And I knew enough about how Ford Credit calculated the required capital and working capital and all that stuff.
Okay.
I did my pro forma in a way that was very favorable towards me.
And Ford knew you could roll cars. At the end of the day, right?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I was still, I've never been a dealer. I've
Yeah.
never been a general manager. I was still the GSM.
Yeah, I got you.
And so
they weren't sure you could bite off the whole, run the whole
and
deal.
I was still, let's face it, I was a dealer's kid.
Yeah.
And as a general rule, a dealer's kid doesn't get much respect.
I know.
Right. Rodney Dangerfield.
That's right.
But I figured it out.
Yeah.
I bought the entire dealership,
Wow.
the real estate, the franchise, the FF&E, parts,
Beautiful.
everything all in for $920,000.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. But the dealership had gone broke twice in 7 years.
Okay, so you had to get in.
Wanted to touch it.
Yeah, you had to roll your shirt sleeves up
It
and
was
run
on
that.
2 acres.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Total. But I put almost all the purchase on real estate,
And you were the dealer.
and so I borrowed $320,000 from my grandfather.
Okay. So your grandfather's still around. He's
Oh,
still okay. Is he still got a store?
At that time, no,
Okay.
but I borrowed $320,000 from my grandfather. He was on my dad's side of this argument.
Okay.
So he was telling me, man, you got to settle things with your dad.
Yeah.
At the same time,
Yeah.
he loaned me $320 under the table without my dad knowing.
Oh boy.
And it's really funny.
Yeah.
I can talk about it now.
Yeah.
But you had to prove to Ford Credit, who was making this loan, that I had unencumbered funds.
Yeah. That's right.
I didn't feel like I was allowed
Yeah.
for it to be loaned from my grandfather. So I took it down to the bank, and I opened a CD on Monday of $320,000, and then
There's my unencumbered funds.
I went back on Tuesday, and I took the money out. Sorry, I made a bad decision. Take the money out.
Right.
And they said, well, you're going to pay a penalty. I'm
No
like,
problem.
I understand.
Yeah.
But
That's
now
amazing.
I had
Wow.
paperwork. And so Ford Credit said, well, where'd this money come from? And I said, well, I've had this money sitting in a CD,
Exactly.
which is true.
Mm-hmm.
And I just took it out.
Right.
Here it is. I've got it in my bank account. And here's the paperwork where I closed out a CD. It's so
Figured it out.
that's how it happened.
That's amazing. And I'm sure your grandfather was very proud of you, right? To put the deal
And
together.
so, at the time, at the time, I had figured out that I needed to make at least $180,000 a year. $15,000 a month was my
kind of your
standard of living.
Yeah,
my
yeah,
nut,
yeah.
if you would.
Yeah.
I had 2 children.
Yeah.
And a wife.
Yep.
And $15,000 a month was it for me at the time.
Right.
And so we were very successful very quickly.
Yeah.
And because I had hired and trained so many people at Tomball Ford, I had a lot of them follow me.
Yeah.
Still ugly with my dad at the time.
And you're competing with your dad. I mean,
Not
basically.
really, we're 2 hours away.
Okay. So it wasn't the same market. Okay.
Once I recognized that, we're going to be successful, I'm going to make at least $180,000 a year.
Yeah.
I ended up calling my dad saying, hey,
Bury the hatchet.
I'll sell my stock for whatever you pay me for it.
Okay.
I just want to be done with this.
Right.
And they ended up paying me $1 million for that stock. And the Dodge Chrysler Jeep dealership across the street, the guy that was my GSM that I worked for as a kid, called me up and said, hey, I'm moving out of town. Come buy me out.
No kidding.
So this all worked out kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
I got $1 million from my dad. I paid back my grandfather the $320, and I bought the Dodge Chrysler Jeep dealership across the street for the $700.
Oh my God. Wow.
And so now, in 3 months' time, I had 2 dealerships in town.
Yep.
We were quite successful fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
18 months later, I bought the Dodge Chrysler Jeep store in town.
Okay.
So,
wow, you were on a roll.
in roughly 22 months,
Okay.
I'd gone from being unemployed with no money to having 3 dealerships in the small town of Port Lavaca, Texas.
That is an amazing story. It really is. It's so inspiring.
Yeah, I'd say, I lean back on the old Janis Joplin, me and my Bobby McGee song of
Right.
freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
That's right. That's
You know, everybody asks
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
how do you take all this risk and go out there and stretch
I
yourself?
love it.
And,
I love it.
and the answer is
You do
I
it.
didn't have nothing to lose.
That's right. That's right. No kid. Wow.
There was no risk for me.
Yeah. So talk to me about your dad, because I know there's some tragedy there. So
Yeah.
well,
So
walk me through that for the people that don't know. That's
my dad was a great man.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I think our family attorney described it best in that he had a squirrel cage in his head, and he couldn't figure out how to get the squirrel off of the squirrel cage.
Yeah.
He just had a wheel in his head that was going 24/7.
Sure.
And it literally drove him mad.
Yeah.
We questioned whether or not he was bipolar. We questioned whether or not he was manic, but very brilliant businessman, and a ton of energy.
Yeah.
Just literally that squirrel cage drove him mad.
Yeah.
And he made the decision that maybe he ought to get on antidepressants. He did, and he was on antidepressants for about a week before he shot himself.
Oh, jeez.
Literally 2 weeks after, it was all over the news about how there had been all these studies done where the risk of suicide, greatly increases right after a person starts taking antidepressants. And it was like a textbook story for what happened with him. But the good news is that, it had been a long time, a couple years since I had gotten off the ground in Port Lavaca.
Right.
We had the opportunity to heal our relationship, make things better, bury the hatchet, all those types of things.
Right.
Before he passed away.
That's great.
But it also
Still tough. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Super tough. And also clearly the biggest opportunity for me in my lifetime, because while we were very successful in Port Lavaca, these were small stores.
Yeah.
Tomball was a big Metro Houston Ford store that was worth a ton of money.
Yeah.
And I would work my whole life to be able to have enough money to buy something of that size.
Right.
And so, about 6 months after my father had died, Ford went to my mom and said, we want to talk to you about the future of this dealership.
Sure.
You got 3 options. You can operate it if you want to, but we hope you don't. You don't really have any business being in the car business.
Yeah.
Number 2 is, it's a big store. It's worth a lot of money.
Right.
And you can sell it to somebody else if you want, but we hope you don't.
Okay.
Of course, she's like, okay, you don't want me to keep it.
You don't want me to sell it. What do you want me to do? Right.
And unbeknownst to her and unbeknownst to me, kind of a surprise to everybody, was, we hope that you sell it to Ben.
How about that?
And then in the shocker, they turned to me. I was in the meeting with my mom. They turned to me and said, Ben, we want you to sell everything in Port Lavaca and move back to Houston.
Look at that. I came out of left field.
At the time, we'd taken this small Ford store that had gone broke twice in 7 years. We were roughly, 500% sales efficient.
Wow.
We were now the number one volume select Ford dealer in the nation.
In this little store.
We were selling about 800-900 new per year. and selling over 100 cars, new and used.
Sure.
And
Nice
doing
operation.
really well.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the moment where I came on the scene
Mhm.
for the manufacturers of saying, "Oh, this guy's not just a dealer's kid.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing.
That's
He can
right.
sell cars."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Do you
so-
think some of that too, that the situation between yourself and your dad drove you, as in we see in so many cases that
There's no question.
I'll show him.
Right. I would say, everybody's got, an oddity about them.
Sure.
Talk about my dad having the squirrel cage in his head.
Sure.
For me, I've got some sort of a screw loose that
Well, we're going to get into that in a minute because you're sitting in one of these cars.
I love. Competition
Yeah.
feeds my soul.
Right.
Is what I would say.
Yeah.
And so, whether it is, when I'm hanging out with my family,
Yeah.
I want to play cards. I want to play Rummikub. I want to play.
I think you just want to win. Whatever we're playing.
It's fun for me.
Sure. Sure.
My recreation is racing cars.
Right.
But my vocation of selling cars is also
Right. Competitive.
super competitive environment.
Right.
And that feeds my soul in some way. And so I love the business. At the time early on, I didn't have a life outside the business.
Yeah.
I didn't have any recreation.
Yeah.
This competitive business was my recreation and my vocation and my life.
Right. As it is with a lot of car guys and a lot of people in the business.
It would be foolish for me to say that challenge, if you will, or that situation with my dad didn't drive me.
Right.
Sure it did.
Sure.
It drove me.
It drove you.
It drove me
In
in
fact-
the same way that first month of selling cars at Covert Ford drove me.
Right.
I'm willing to put myself on the line. I'm willing to take all the risk, and there ain't nobody that's going to outwork me.
Right.
There's nobody that's going to out problem solve me.
Sure.
And, I'll put it all on the line, and I'm going to figure out how to do it.
Right.
Come hell or high water. It's the deal.
You've done pretty good at that and holding that philosophy, because as we sit here today, the Keating Auto Group enjoys 32 rooftops,
31.
31
Today.
dealerships. Wow.
Wait till next month.
Next
We'll
month,
have
there'll be another acquisition in there, right? And in a very short period of time. Talk to me about that. I mean, in some 23 years, you've accumulated 31 dealerships.
So
that's a very aggressive growth rate.
Yeah. Every time I could cobble together enough money, I'd buy another store. And we were selling a lot of cars, which means we were attractive to a lot of manufacturers.
Right. Yeah.
Manufacturers were putting opportunities in front of us.
Okay.
Often.
Okay. Stores that need to be turned around, and they knew if you could get in there and do it. Yeah.
And
Sure.
it was a matter of us being able to put together enough money.
Sure.
And the reason why I said Tomball Ford, so let me go back to that.
Yeah.
I could never have been able to afford that size of a store.
Mm-hmm.
My mom and I worked out a deal where she sold me the store
Okay.
and she carried the note.
Okay.
So my father had all these rules that everybody in the family knew. If anything ever happens to me,
Right.
sell the store. Do not try to operate it. Don't try to operate it to my mom.
Yeah.
Sell the store. Don't sell it for stock. Only sell it for cash.
Okay.
And don't carry a note.
Okay.
Get your money and get out.
Right.
And
Which gets back to your dad thinking,
and
the
here's
sky is falling.
Here's a list of 3 people you could call who will give you a good offer.
Wow. He was pretty detailed with it. Yeah.
And so, don't sell it to a family member.
Okay.
Remember, all my family members were in the business.
Yeah, of course.
That one of his rules was don't sell it to a family member, don't carry a note, don't take stock,
Sure.
don't try to operate it. So
Sure.
we all knew these rules.
Right.
Well, when Ford says, hey, we really want you to sell it to Ben,
Yeah.
I'm like, man, that'd be a dream come true.
Of course. No question.
And my mom broke all the rules.
Yeah.
She carried the note.
Yeah.
She sold it to a family member.
Sure.
Sure. And
It worked out.
she was very wise, though. She She had a board of advisors made up of my grandfather,
Oh, okay.
the general manager,
Okay.
that had been at Tomball Ford,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
family attorney
Okay.
I talked about.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of advisors, and they structured it in such a way that I was not allowed to take any money out of the store
Okay.
until she got paid off.
Okay.
Like zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to take a payroll. I wasn't allowed to take a distribution.
Sure.
She got all the money out of the store, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I could live off of Port Lavaca.
Of course. Yeah.
But in March so I bought that store, I think in September of 2005.
Okay.
In March of 06, I'd taken a bunch of stuff that I'd learned in Port Lavaca and brought it back up into Tomball Ford.
Sure.
And we had a huge month.
Wow.
We were the number one volume F-Series dealer in the nation.
Oh, my gosh.
We were the number one volume Ford store in Houston. All of these were a really big deal.
Yeah, of course.
For this sleepy little store in Tomball. And Chrysler came in the front door of Tomball Ford and said, "Hey, we saw what you did. We want you to have one of our stores."
That's how it happens.
I said, "Hey, the only thing I'd be interested in is the one right across the street." Again, making a long story short, they helped me work out a deal to buy the dealership across the street, but I didn't have any money still.
Because you're not taking any money out of the store.
And my mom was loving the success that we were having.
Of course.
Loving being involved in the business in a way that she'd never been involved in.
And her son,
before.
she's helping her son at the same time. Yeah.
So my mom loaned me half of the money to buy the Dodge store, and Chrysler Financial loaned me the other half.
There you go.
So
isn't it amazing how these deals come together?
We had bought, I had bought 5 stores at this point, really 6 stores, because then Chrysler helped us buy the Chrysler Jeep store and moved it in to one.
Okay.
But we had bought 6 stores, and they were all 100% leveraged, all on loan.
Oh, my gosh.
And so in 2013, I paid my mom off.
There you go.
And that was really the big catalyst to where, now I've got a lot more cash flow.
Yeah.
Now my options are open.
Yep.
But, if I look back from when we started in 2002, roughly it's one dealership per year.
Wow.
For 17 years.
Incredible.
So in 2019, we owned 17 stores.
Oh, my gosh. That's a very impressive growth plan.
And
were you, if I'm not mistaken, you for the GMs and the management in there that take these stores over, because obviously it's one thing to buy a store, it's another to be able to run the store, right, the way that it's been running, or increase volume and net profit and what have you. You got to have the right operator in there, right?
Yes. And again, this kind of goes back to Tomball Ford.
Yeah.
When I had this ugly split with my dad.
Yeah.
It's the same time I'd bought these 3 dealerships in Port Lavaca.
Okay.
Because I had hired and trained all the people at Tomball Ford.
Yeah.
I ended up, I would say stealing. That has a bad connotation, even though that's what it was. I ended up bringing
better term,
14 people.
Wow.
Managers.
Okay.
Out of Tomball Ford.
Okay.
To Port Lavaca.
Okay. So these are your disciples when it's time to acquire these other stores. Yeah.
And we made the decision. I didn't realize that the whole world didn't operate like Houston.
Yeah.
In Houston, there are 26 Ford dealers, and I learned how to convince people to come all the way up to Tomball to buy a car at Tomball Ford.
Pretty good.
In the competition with these other 26 dealers.
Wow.
They still make money.
That they've got to pass to get to your store.
And so when I moved down to South Texas, I thought that's the way the world operated. And I'm like, whoa.
Surprise.
People are advertising their cars at $100 over invoice.
Right. Where am I going? Yeah.
I'm used to losing $1,500 on every car I'm advertising. And so we made the decision not to change anything about the way we were going to operate.
Okay.
And so we were bringing the big city Houston operation to this small community in South Texas.
Sure.
And we were enormously successful.
Sure.
But because I was bringing so much horsepower,
yeah,
so much people asset into the deal.
Sure.
Everybody from a sales manager to a finance manager to a service manager, everybody knew what they were doing and they were really good at it.
Yeah. And then also it should be said that it was probably easier for you to even acquire outside talent that knew of the success of your stores. Not yet. No,
that's true today.
Okay.
Big time.
Okay.
But back then, not true.
Okay.
Because I would only promote from within.
Okay.
Because they knew how we did things.
Right.
They knew
They knew the system. They knew the Keating
what
system.
kind of decisions I would make and why I would make them. And
Right.
so they'd make a decision like me.
Yeah, of course.
And so as we grew, so the way we have our group, the operator of the store has an equity ownership in the store.
Okay.
And I'm a huge believer in that. And
Right.
I've learned a lot through the years, trial and error on
Right.
how that is set up for us.
Right. Right.
But what I would say is that, we ended up taking people out of Port Lavaca. Quite frankly, we called Port Lavaca the Valley of Death. That's literally what we call it, because if you can sell cars in Port Lavaca, you can sell cars anywhere.
Right. Right.
And if you've gone through the Valley of Death and come out the other side, then you're going to be successful anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up taking people, out of Port Lavaca and promoting them into, okay, you go run this store in Bernie, you go run this store in Grapevine.
Yeah.
You go run this store in College Station. So it was always, for the longest time, it was always promoting from within and giving them an opportunity to run their own store.
That's fantastic. And are they equity partners today in many cases?
Yes.
That's fantastic. So it gives them all that opportunity.
You bet.
Yeah, as well.
So, up to 2019, we'd been in business for 17 years and we had 17 stores. Today, in the last 5 years, we've added 14 stores.
Oh my gosh.
So we bought 3 in 2020. We bought 8 in 2021.
Wow.
And then we bought 3
And these are during
in
times.
24.
These are times that everybody's getting a lot of money for their stores.
Yes. Although I'll say that all the deals we did in 2020, we closed them in 2020, but they were
deal before COVID.
like I closed a deal on March 7th.
Oh.
A week before COVID was announced.
Oh boy.
So I closed a deal in March 7th and one in June and then one in November, kind of before we knew what COVID was going to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And then in 2021, I bought 8 stores. It was really 3 groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was 2 groups and 1 individual store.
Okay.
All of them closed within 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Wow,
but incredible.
By that time, yes, the expectations were really high.
Yeah.
But at that time in 21, even the feeling was, this is going the other way next month. This is the peak.
That's right. That's right.
And the reality is that it wasn't really the peak.
No, I know.
And so I got really lucky is what I would say.
You really did. Yeah. So if we're sitting here 10 years from now, what would the Keating Auto Group be comprised of? I mean, are you just on that treadmill to go, let's get more stores? And
I have no idea.
You love the hunt?
I do love the hunt.
Yeah.
Where we are, I'll say we're a very shallow organization.
Okay.
We don't have, vice presidents or market presidents or, regional people.
Sure.
We have me, COO of kind of an operations guy at Stephen Livesay, and we've got a CFO, kind of a money, accounting, business-oriented guy, and Don Whitaker, and the 3 of us kind of run everything.
Yeah.
But
you're always looking at deals.
Say again?
You're always looking at deals, though.
I'm always looking at deals, but I'm also always, I think it's fair to say we are almost always beyond our bandwidth.
Yeah. Seems like you live on the edge. You like that. That's
true.
part of your DNA.
I would say I'm always looking for deals. Never say never.
Yeah.
I know myself well enough to say I'm probably going to buy something this year.
Sure. So for dealers watching in this region, that might be a call.
All my deals are in Texas. I'm only a dealer in Texas.
Okay.
And I want to stay that way.
You do. Okay.
I want to stay that way.
Keep them all close.
And I only want, we have defined our purchase requirement of we want to sell at least 150 cars a month.
Yeah. Wow.
And so we're looking at least 1,800 to 2,000 total volume per year.
Okay.
On a deal. But I'll also say that, it's like any other business or any other organization. It's about people.
Of course. No question.
And we've grown so quickly that it is, we're thin on our people bench, I would say.
Right.
And we're not thin on our people bench. We've got we got 2,700 people that work inside the Keating Auto Group.
Wow.
We got a lot of people that have made it well known. Hey, pick me. I'm in line for the next one.
Yeah.
We are thin in terms of the people that we feel like are really ready to run a big store. We got a lot of people that we'd be like, if we bought a small store, you'd be great for that.
Yeah.
But running a small store and running a big operation are just different.
So let's switch gears a little bit because there's a lot happening in retail automotive today.
There is.
And the President Trump just announced that we're going full guns in terms of tariffs, 25% on all cars, all parts from every foreign brand out there.
Yes.
As the owner of 20 or 31 dealerships today, and what is your take on that when you hear that? What are your concerns?
So I'll talk about a macro concern and a micro concern in that, I loved macroeconomics so much in college that I almost switched my major. What I will say is that in today's day and age, it's a global economy.
Mm-hmm.
Flat out.
Yeah.
It's a global economy.
Yeah.
I think that, I am very much in favor of making America great again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much in favor of bringing business here.
Yeah.
However, I think it's pretty short-sighted to try to make America more competitive by making it more expensive, which is, in my opinion, the end result of tariffs at some level is going to be inflation.
Yeah.
At some point, that tariff is going to automatically be passed on to the consumer.
Yeah.
Which is the definition of higher prices.
That's right.
Which is the definition of inflation. Which means that rates aren't going to come down at the level that we want them to.
Right.
In
fact, it might go back up.
And part of the reason why the United States is not as competitive is because of whatever, call it I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years of unions demanding, these, higher prices, which obviously gets transferred over into the customer at some level.
Yeah.
The only reason we're building stuff somewhere else is because it's cheaper.
That's right.
And so, we've gone through a really great period, in my opinion.
Yeah.
After NAFTA, of this free trade between Canada and Mexico, and you bring in everybody else. So I think the tariffs are short-sighted, in my opinion.
Okay.
Even though I would really love to see a resurgence in American manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that Trump knows that he wants lower rates.
Yeah.
He knows he doesn't want inflation.
Right.
He knows that the end result of tariffs would be that.
Yeah, of course.
He's smart enough to know all of those things I just talked about.
That's right.
I believe that he learned a lot about being a politician from being on The Apprentice, reality TV.
That's right.
Saying you're fired.
That's right.
Reality TV, the American public loves drama.
Yep.
And he's become an expert at that.
That's right.
I believe he will put the United States in a much better position through negotiating with these tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they won't be a long-term solution for him.
Yeah.
But even if they are a long-term solution for him, in another 4 years, they're going to be gone.
Right. Right. Now, we are sitting in this incredible showroom here, which is in your corporate offices for Keating Auto Group, and you've got these incredible race cars. And I know that that is your passion. So in our final moments here, you got to tell me, how did you get into racing? And then I got to hear, and I want our audience to hear about some of your amazing wins. So how did this whole thing come about?
In Christmas of 2005,
okay,
my wife bought me a weekend at the track for Christmas. She didn't figure out what to get a car guy.
They get a man that has everything.
It's a $225 gift certificate. I didn't know anything about anything.
Okay. You weren't interested in racing? It wasn't like,
not at all.
Wasn't in your...
I knew nothing about
nothing.
Anything.
Right.
Yeah. I took a Dodge Viper off the showroom floor, a Port Lavaca Dodge.
Okay.
I drove it the 3 hours to the track.
Okay.
I did not bring any tools. I did not bring a helmet. I wore shorts, a T-shirt, and tennis shoes. I didn't know that I might have to take off my tires or bleed my brakes. I didn't know I was supposed to have a helmet. I didn't know
this was the real deal.
I was wearing Keens. I didn't know I was supposed to have closed-toed shoes. All that stuff.
Sure.
I really looked like an idiot when I pulled up the first time because I was completely ignorant about it all.
Sure.
And I did it, and I called it an adrenaline flush.
Right.
Because
instead of a rush, it was a flush.
There were 4 groups. There were 20 minutes run groups, 20 minutes every time, which means I was out there. I didn't realize that a normal person could drive a car in that way, beat the hell out of a car for 20 minutes. It was the most fun I'd ever had.
Wow.
But it was a huge adrenaline rush for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then because I didn't know that I was supposed to be working on anything else, I was just sitting there waiting for the next run group. So because there were 4 run groups, 20 minutes each, 20 minutes of pure adrenaline and then 60 minutes of waiting.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever being that relaxed.
Wow.
In that 20 minute and that 60-minute waiting time.
You just,
oh man, that was so much fun. But I had no skill. I didn't know what I was doing.
Sure.
I was just going out there and scaring the crap out of myself.
Right.
And so I promised myself that I'd do it again. So I got it in Christmas in 2005. I did it again I did it for the first time in 2006. I did it again in January of 2007. I really make a shorter story and say that because it was a better value, I ended up buying a race car instead of converting my street car.
Okay.
In my third event ever, because I bought a race car, I got put in the race group.
Oh boy.
So I started racing wheel to wheel without any racecraft, we would call it,
Right.
without any knowledge of what was going on.
This is dangerous.
In my first 6 events, I was involved in 6 incidents.
Oh boy.
That's a fancy word for a wreck.
Okay. Now your wife's probably thinking, maybe I shouldn't have purchased that.
No. The nice thing about buying this race car, it was originally a road car, so it had a title.
Okay.
It had a VIN number.
Okay.
I put it in used car inventory. And she had no idea what I was really doing.
Sure.
But my first 6 events, I was involved in 6 wrecks. I got put on probation. Nobody wanted to drive with me. That's exactly what I needed. So in 2008, so in the off season, I bought a bunch of textbooks, literally. I read up. I bought a simulator. I practiced online.
Those simulators are amazing.
And I learned racecraft, and I learned the skill of driving.
Okay.
And in 2008, I did 8 races, and I won 7 of them.
Oh, my gosh.
So I won the national championship, and I just kept moving up from there. When we won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the Corvette in 23, golly, I'll get choked up talking about it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
to win as an American driver,
right,
in an American car with an American team,
of course,
standing on the top step with 300,000 fans below you, I've got great pictures, but listening to the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, wow. You're representing
up
the
there,
U.S.
representing the U.S.
Right.
by driver, manufacturer, and team.
Yep.
Listening to the Star Spangled Banner above 300,000 French people or people from around the world. I mean, that was powerful. Really special.
Wow.
I'm
getting goosebumps. Listen to that. That's incredible.
To win the world championship.
Yeah.
In
to be
Corvette.
To be a car dealer, representing these brands you must have heard from the leadership of all of these different companies to say, way to go, Ben.
I have.
Yeah.
And that all makes it really special.
I bet. Oh, wow. No question about it. You were awarded Time Dealer of the Year for the state of Texas.
We were it was the Texas nominee.
Nominee, right?
Which
is the winner of Texas.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It is. That's an interesting thing for me. It's such an honor.
Sure.
Because I've grown up in the time period where, I don't think my kids have any idea what Time magazine is.
Right. That's a good point. Right.
Is
that on the line somewhere? Is that a social?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a time period where Time magazine was
it.
That was it.
That's right.
I think, maybe my grandparents would say Life magazine was the big deal for them.
Right. Right.
For my generation, I think Time magazine is probably the one.
That's right.
Even though my children's generation wouldn't know what Time magazine was,
man, a lot of you.
I love the fact that they still partner to create Time Dealer of the Year.
That's amazing.
And I grew up, knowing a lot of the people that won those awards and thinking, that was such a big honor.
Yeah.
And for them, for the Texas Auto Dealers Association to call me up and say, hey, we've chosen you.
Yeah.
A big deal.
That's pretty cool.
One of the things I like to do is to learn from the people who have been there before me.
Yeah.
And so I like to go meet with dealers who are dealer groups that are larger than us.
Sure.
The Rick Hendricks or the, Larry Van Tiles.
Sure.
I'll use Larry Van Tiles. Great friend. I love the guy.
Right.
So much about our auto group is fashioned after what he created.
Really? Okay.
So much about what we've done. I'm like, that's the model I want to do.
Yeah.
He sold all of his stores for a huge amount of money.
Right.
Clearly doesn't need to work anymore, has more money than he can spend. I think he's 82.
Yeah.
somewhere around there, his non-compete ran out, and he gets back in the car business.
Just incredible.
What does that say about Larry?
That's right.
And I have other friends in the business.
Yeah.
I can name a lot of people
Sure.
who are still going out and buying dealerships after being 80 years old.
They love it. They love it. It's in their blood.
I'm afraid I'm inflicted with the same disease. I love the business.
Yeah.
I get a really good return on investment.
Yeah.
I don't think American consumers are going to go away from the automobile for a really long time.
That's true.
I would like to say I'm an omnichannel retailer. I don't care what I don't care what the American public wants to drive.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's an EV
Right.
or an ICE or an airplane.
Right.
Whatever they want to drive, I want to sell it.
That's right.
And however they want to buy it is how I want to sell it to them. And I believe that's going to be true for the next really long time.
Yeah. I would have to.
Long after I'm gone.
That's right.
And so I think it's a fairly stable business.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable having made my bed there, made my home there.
Yeah. You certainly have left your mark. There's no question.
If I look at the people who have been there before me,
Right.
I have to say that's probably me.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I don't have to be in the office 24/7,
Right.
If I can take all the time I need away, sure, why not keep doing it?
Yep. Yep. Ben Keating, thank you so much.
Jim.
This has been such a pleasure and an honor, and keep doing what you're doing. You're making
That's
us
the
look,
plan.
You're making us look great in retail automotive.
As long as I can, as
That's
long
right.
as I'm going to keep driving race cars, I'll do it. Then I'll go to the ranch.
Thanks for watching The Executive Profile, exclusively on CBT News. Today's episode has been sponsored by the Presidio Group.